These are real. These are not real. I mean, these are real, but the probabilities are not real, and I couldn't see them. And these are the top tokens. So in this case, I prompted it with 0.5 top p, which means it selects tokens until it's got a cumulative probability of 50%. So 50% of the time, these words will follow the I wish that I could be according to the big matrices that make up the model. And then it picks among these words with a weighted random probability. So bird here would be picked about, so this is top 50%, so about 13% of the time you would get bird. Better is more likely, but doesn't mean it's picked every time. So the randomness is here where the model is allowed some creativity in some sense to pick different words which are less likely. And of course, this is very simple. And then there's a lot of structure on top of this, which can alter these parameters and change the way it picks tokens or train it differently, or perhaps put a reward model to make the probabilities different. But just to mention two of them, temperature is how likely it is to pick, temperature means how often it picks the unlikely words. So maximum temperature, you get lots of red. You can just see here, and also this is wrong. And low temperature, you get a lot of green or very light yellow, which means it's going to pick the likely token. It's going to be boring. So imagine if temperature is sort of a parameter for creativity, and normally it's set at 1, and top P is normally set at 0.8 on the ChatGPT, as far as I know. But you can set it in the playground, and then you can add a frequency penalty. Sometimes it kind of gets stuck into repeating itself, and you can sort of make that not happen. A very interesting thing I saw a few months ago was try to tell GPT, write the letter A as many times as you can. And at some point, it will stop writing it and then put random words after it because the frequency penalty kicked in. So there's lots of things that you can alter, but basically, this is what models do. So importantly, the main thing I want to tell you is that they have no clue what comes after a word when they pick it. So when they pick a word, they pick it based on the past, but not on the future, and then so on and so on. So if it looks like the model knows where it's going, it cannot know, again, unless it is being enhanced with a further structure. And we'll talk about this more in little. So if you ask what can a language model do, well, a toy language model, of course, just predicts the next word. Like 10 years ago, we saw those things like we trained machine learning on all the letters the Queen has ever written, and it's a random letter from the Queen. Some of you might have seen that in some tabloid. But now they have emergent capabilities, so they show ability to do something that they shouldn't be able to do. And in a way, that's like the human brain, where we know how one neuron can talk to another, but that's how we are alive, and that doesn't make sense from the small structure. So they can do lots of these things and more, but effectively, what they do is they answer queries and perform tasks. So if you ask it, give me text which is about this, and they do their best to predict it. So they can be customized and enhanced. So it's not like there's one language model and we all use that. There's prompt engineering, which means you give prompts which are tricky. They don't mimic natural language. You introduce foreign elements and the model changes based on that. Supervised fine-tuning, which means you train it with humans. We have very low wages in third world countries, sadly, which push yes when the answer is good, no when the answer is not good. Self-supervised reflection, you put a model on top of another, and you ask a model to moderate the other. Bing AI initially was very moody. It would insult the user. There's been a case in which it threatened the user. And so what they did, instead of changing it, which probably was too pricey, they put another model on top of it, which stops the conversation. So if you speak to Bing and you're mean to it, it says, I don't want to continue this conversation, start over, which probably means there's a moderator there which interjects and say, yeah, stop. Reward models, if you use the letter A, I will, you just lower artificially that some tokens being picked. This is how they filter curse words or other things that don't want to appear. Filters, again, instead of intervening on the picking step, you just let it pick it and then you delete it and you rerun until it doesn't. User interfaces, sometimes when you use a model, you don't see all the prompts. For instance, when you use ChatGPT, there are 2 invisible lines at the start of every prompt, which tell you what date it is, and a few things about being concise, to save a few words to the server, a few That was a few tokens, so to save money on the server processing time. So it runs less times. Plugins, GPT and other models can use external resources. For example, GPT can use Wolfram Alpha, can query it, and then get an answer back and read the answer and interpret it. And then, of course, interaction with other generative AI. You can put two models to talk, leave the room, and see what happens. Not particularly, more boring than you think it would be, but yeah. So don't think about the static ChatGPT browser. Large language models have potential to be passively integrated into everything we do, and they already are at this stage. So think about an integrated language model, something like your car looks at how you're driving, and then it gives you information about it using a language model. Multimodal, GPT-4 can see pictures and understand what's going on in the pictures, not pictures of text, pictures. I put this here, what happens if I hit it towards the right? It's going to fall. GPT-4 can do that. High usage limits. Right now, we have a lot of little silly limitations on context, length. Of course, the cost of computing is going down very fast, as usual with innovations. Available to everyone. The more advanced models are still behind paywalls. It's a matter of time. There's a strong business incentive in getting users to join your model because users can then train it, providing further data. So it's the best. It's basically a freemium model. So you can, now it's freemium, but it will likely be free effectively. So it will be soon available to everyone with a few sacrifices on privacy probably. Everywhere, I mean, literally everywhere. I don't know if you updated apps recently, but everything seems to have an AI integrated in it recently. I mean, Grammarly has an AI in it. I don't know why. I don't know what it does. Turn it off, but it does. And highly specialized in that ChatGPT or others are now sort of general language models, but there are models that you can train only on astrophysics books and have them do astrophysics. Do they work well? Less well than we thought they would, but surely there are some applications. For instance, there is a GPT model which is specialized in math proof, and it produced some original, not very hard proofs. And that's a separate thing from ChatGPT. It's just been trained separately. So it may be that, I mean, self-driving cars are another example. They're not language models, but something very specialized which does only that task using similar technology. So do not focus on the current structure when you can prompt it. A few months ago, I would have said when you can only write text to it, but now you can talk to it, you can take pictures, you can give it videos and ask to summarize the video. You all have seen the thing where you upload a video in French and it gives you the same video in English with audio that matches the dub. So it's a bot on Twitter, you can just summon it for free. So there's lots of different things that you can do. I'm mentioning this one because I think it was on BBC, so probably it made the rounds. So in terms of mathematics, so it can totally process and write symbols and notations. It's not bothered by mathematical notation at all. It can read and write later codes, more on that later. Can write code in almost every language. I've tried, MATLAB, GAP, Magma for algebraists, and it can do that reasonably well. It can actually be queryable from Alpha and interpret the results. Sometimes it will decide to do that. So you give it an equation, and instead of trying to solve it, it just queries from Alpha and then gets it back. And then it can read and process graphical data. So you can take a picture of something and then ask it to solve the problem, and it can do that. So these are the wider abilities that are sort of specialized in mathematics and mathematics education. So this is something you can do and something I did. This is not the actual exercise with which I did it, because that's an exam which will happen in June, so I cannot show it to you. But I was writing a foundations exam, and so I wrote the question. Imagine this one. Again, for students watching me, it's not this one. No similarity. We haven't done this even in the course. And so you say solve. So take a picture, just solve it, no code. No code means don't try to write Python to solve this because you're bad at it, just solve it. And then it does, it solves it. I cannot show you the whole thing, and sadly I cannot share conversations which contain pictures yet, technical limitations, but happy to show it to you if you want to see it. It solves it, and then I'm like, oh, good job, it's correct. Now give me the later codes. Okay, here's the later codes, and it does. So I copy the later code, I've written the solution for my foundations exam. I need to check they're correct, of course. In this case, they were. In other cases, they weren't. And then either I said to GPT, this is wrong, do it again, or I would just fix it myself, depending on how long it was. But it's something you can do, and so your students can do. Literally taking a picture of the paper and having it generate the solution. So the lowest conceivable effort. Moreover, Google can solve equations. So back in a few months ago, if you actually Google this, solve this random equation with exponentials, you will actually solve it. Now, apparently, Google is not that confident anymore. So instead, it would just tell you find solutions on the web. By the way, just notice I should have put brackets here. And Google app can literally just, again, take a picture of the equation, and then it tells you how to solve the problem through BART, which is Google's language model. So you can, again, do this through your phone. Same for GPT. But GPT, you need to have the paid version, I think, but BART is free. So you can download your Google app and just show an equation and say, how do I solve it? It's going to give you all the steps. So most advanced models have AI-enhanced voice recognition. You can talk to it as Tony Stark talks to Jarvis, okay? We're there. They can see and interpret and reproduce deepfakes, audio, pictures, and videos. They can, and they do that really easily. Videos are picking up now, but it looks like they're not as hard as we thought. They are everywhere in websites and apps. I mean, famous Microsoft 365 Copilot, which will put a new large language model Clippy in your Word, which is coming out recently. Grammarly as an AI, and they're basically everywhere. It's hard to find a website that doesn't have it. The other day, Booking.com had it. They exist in a lot of wrappers, so sometimes you cannot even tell it's there. Sometimes you can tell what model it is, and you cannot tell how it's been prompted, and surely you have no idea about the privacy policy of all that. So all sorts of considerations, but models can change a lot. Classic example is Bing GPT. Bing AI is also based on GPT-4, but try talking to Bing and to GPT-4. It's like talking to two different people, like two entirely different things, because Bing has been changed a little. And I mean, if you ask GPT to talk like a pirate, it's going to talk like a pirate. So just a few lines can change everything. And then, so if you read like, oh, large language models are really bad at this. I tried it once while I was cooking dinner and it didn't work. It just means, yeah, I could not make it work. I mean, maybe there's something they generally cannot do, but it's kind of a safe assumption to say, yeah, they probably can do it with enough effort. And as soon as you find a way to do it, you can just copy and paste it and put it in a wrapper, and now everyone can. So it's not a matter of individual ability. If it takes 5 hours for me to figure out how to make GPT solve logarithmic equations, all I have to do then is copy and paste it on my website, logarithmicequations.com, and all of humanity can make GPT do that. Because these things can be copied and pasted because they're digital. So this is kind of where we are now, and where we absolutely know where we were 6 months ago. I think all of these things were false 6 months ago. My experience with maths, again, is that it's good at calculus and equations in general. It can totally do basic mathematics, so think about anything GCSE and below. It's very inconsistent on linear algebra and trigonometry. Trigonometry is a weird one. I think sine and cosine are too similar, so it just doesn't do it well. And linear algebra, yeah, it's hit or miss. They're bad so far at algebra, group theory, category theory, in general, abstract proof based. I think we can all agree that a correct group theory proof and a wrong group theory proof look the same. I do group theory. I can talk about it. So, and they cannot do it. Like I just ask, can you prove this thing on? There's a group action. Can you prove it? And it just gives me random words. So so far, GPT-4, which is allegedly the most advanced, at least according to all benchmarks, is not able to do this well. It can be very inconsistent. Again, when it gets you right, it gets you right. So there's that. It offers structured answers. It's got this thing where first it tells you what it's going to do, and then it does it, which is a reflection of the fact that it has no future prediction. So the most likely answers to succeed are those in which it prompts itself into succeeding. So if you do reinforced learning, then that's what you get. So it always starts the answers like, okay, we're going to do this, this, and that. I think there was an example here. Yeah, so to solve this problem, we'll take the following steps. 1, 2, 3, and then it does the steps. So that's kind of what you get spontaneously. You don't have to tell it to do it. And it tends to default to standard proof structure. So if there's a proof where normally this kind of statement is proved by contradiction, but this time it doesn't work, yeah, it's not going to figure it out. Again, because it goes on similarity. Of course, currently, this is my experience. I'm not saying it's universal. Maybe there's a prompt in which you tell it you are Terence Tao, and it becomes great at maths. It's possible, okay? At least in my experience, I wasn't able to make it consistently successful in this stuff. Where's the laser? Okay. So a few words specifically about maths and maths education and students. So we are very lucky compared to every other faculty, every other department, every other subject, because first of all, I've seen this before. Wolfram Alpha can do integrals. So if you want to assess students on integration by substitution, well, you're not able to do it authentically since 10 years ago, unless you do something more creative that Wolfram Alpha cannot replicate. In my undergrad, hard integral takes me half an hour. I put it into Wolfram and see how it's done. And my undergrad was many years ago. So we use closed book examinations a lot, despite the critiques, despite we're probably among the top people using them. Again, these two things are not independent of each other. So if you get students in a room, there may be artificial general intelligence outside of the room. It's still not in there. So you're assessing them on what they can do. So there's that. So we have more time to figure it out. We don't have 90% of our assessments are not vulnerable to malpractice. We have like 15% of our assessments, depending on universities, of course. And then learning objectives in maths are sort of naturally immune to easy replication. In that, again, you need to understand what's going on to be able to write a proof correctly, and GPT in certain subjects, well, GPT language models in certain subjects still don't. So again, mathematics is generally hard, to the point that being able to solve a certain set of basic math problems is a benchmark that they test new language models against. If you've seen about this Q-star rumor about OpenAI last week, the thing that allegedly triggered OpenAI people to say this is dangerous was that allegedly Q-star, which is this new model thing, it could solve basic math problems, because that's basically the highest level of abstractions of human thought. So maths, again, is sort of as a natural immunity or natural resistance. Okay, immunity is too much. So we have more time, better, we work in a better context, and we've seen this before. Again, I don't want to say calculators, but also Wolfram Alpha. Also, I mean, calculators that can solve polynomials. There's all sorts of things that have been introduced in relatively recent times. So again, what happened with calculators? Not because GPT is a calculator, but because historically, what happened? Well, what happened is that initially they were rejected as the devil. They're not going to be able to do multiplications anymore. And then we realized maybe we still want them to be able to multiply 7 times 3 in their heads, because that's useful regardless of whether a machine can do it for you. But maybe we don't want to teach them to use logarithmic tables, because that's annoying and calculators are better. So what we did is sort of educate students on calculators usage, abilities, limits, and effectiveness. So, you know, PEMDAS and all the fact that order on calculators matters, something calculators cannot self-mitigate against. Some ILOs, intended learning objectives, disappeared. Use these logarithmic tables to compute. They do this very long division. I don't think I've seen that recently. Others were adopted. There are some questions in my course where we say compute the determinant of this matrix, and then compute the determinant of this matrix to the 100 billionth power. So you cannot put it in a calculator. We probably have seen that. And then all you do is diagonalize it basically and realize it's like -1 to the 10 billion. Other objectives, however, remain identical. With calculator, it's a bit silly to do a higher education example, but we do assess primary school kids on multiplication. And how we do it is we do non-calc papers, right? We get them in a room and we say, you don't have a calculator now, what are you going to do? And this enables us to assess them authentically and motivates them to learn the thing, because they're not going to have the calculator when they are in the room. So even though if they use the calculator at home and outsource their work, at some point they're going to realize that's not a winning strategy. But otherwise, we assume that they have calculators. Okay? We don't try to say don't use it at home, or say if I catch you using a calculator in your take-home assessment, I'm going to give you a 0. That would be crazy, right? It's what we're doing with AI. So my suggestion is think about learning objectives. Think about what you want to. This is a toy framework, just to say a few words about it. But think about what you want to say, what you want to remove. For instance, maybe you don't care a lot about. I have an example here, like memory-based assessments. Now, no language models are not great at factual accuracy, but as soon as you link them to a factual database, they are. So a language model that reads Wikipedia is not going to get the definition of a group wrong. That's what I'm saying, or the date of birth of Napoleon wrong. all the emphasis on writing style and spelling, I mean, the emphasis on spelling was already a bit silly given Grammarly, but still, there's that. And factual recall, again, when models are linked to databases, might not be the best thing that you want as a learning objective. Just like now you don't want manual arithmetic. And then, sorry, my phone is ringing, so I have to shut it down. And then adapt or integrate or fortify, for instance, solve polynomial equations. Maybe you introduce more complex equations. Think about the example of the power of the matrix with calculators. So here, maybe you strengthen with traditional essays and content creation. You introduce creative writing, or you introduce a step-based process. I'm not sure. There was a third point here, but it's gone. But you introduce a step-based process where students can use language models to write, but they have to show that they're actually co-writing. So for instance, you meet projects, okay, dissertation, classic thing we probably all supervise. You meet them once a week or once every 2 weeks, and they give you a draft, and you track draft progress, you talk to them, you suggest changes. They're probably going to, this probably is evidence that they're doing some work on it because you speak to them. And if they're entirely clueless because they generated with AI at home, you're going to notice. And then, of course, keep some things we want to keep. Like we still want people to be able to solve exponential equations, probably. So that's when you get them in the room or assessing controlled conditions, whatever that may mean. And these acts as motivator to learn the aforementioned skills. So there's a distinction to be made here between different objectives, some of which are obsolete, some of which are still important to keep despite models being able to do it, and some others you need to do them with models. So now you are twice as efficient as before. This is general, but in particular for mathematics, you can draw a few comparisons with calculators again, and sort of generalize. So why is this important? So in my Talmud talk, there was this Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes comic, which said, can we just outsource math to the computers and go play outside? And like, why not? Well, why not is because large language models get things wrong, okay? So this is a comment from a student on Reddit, which I really liked. It just says, I don't know how to do the thing. And so I don't need, if GPT does it, I don't know if GPT did it well either. So it's twice the work for me. I have to deal with my mistakes and its mistakes. The thing is, GPT looks so great to us because we're able to tell whether the exercise is correct at a glance, because we already know the thing. But for students, you gave me 3 answers. 1 is right, 2 are wrong. Which is which? They don't know. That's why they're learning. That's why they're signed up to uni. So if you want to use AI efficiently and safely, you need the user to already know the skill. And the classic metaphor is AI needs to be a co-pilot and never a pilot. So if you don't know where you're going, AI maybe can tell you, remember to turn right, but you're not going to be able if AI is right in that, unless you know the general direction. So this is important because if we outsource education and say like, oh, we don't need to do this learning objective anymore because language models can do it, and then there's some factual accuracy element in there. When and if AI gets it wrong in the future, we have lost the ability to tell. And by we, I mean human species. We're dead. Our students are now the oldest people alive, and we didn't teach them. So there's an argument there where students still need a solid background and to be able to critically evaluate. And just teaching them critical thinking about what a model says is probably not enough because there are some basic skills which they need to know, right? So education remains very, very important. And there's an example I used to make, again, in the Talmud talk, is that you train a model on a medieval library, it's not going to be able to figure out the Copernican model. It's not going to be able to figure out that it's not the Earth at the center of the universe because all the texts say that. And the model is just sort of learning on the text. Well, they kind of did that. They kind of trained one on 17th century text. This is called MonaGPT. Now, they use it to make very bad examples on what models can say about slavery. But if you ask about stuff that's not that, what's outer space made of, it just goes with Aristotelic nonsense. So if you talk to it, it's very fun. If you click on this, there's a link. I think you will send us live at some point. Again, don't ask me about slavery. But I'm just saying, this is the 17th century, okay? We are now in the 21st. If on the 23rd century, you ask ChatGPT something, it's not going to be able to figure out whatever humans have figured out 200 years from now. So there's a thing where models are sort of static, and as of now, they're not entirely capable of new ideas, because when they generate a new thing, they cannot tell if it's good or bad because they have no reference to the thing. And so that's where the human comes in, okay? You can ask GPT to generate 100 ways in which gravity is compatible with quantum mechanics, well, relativity is compatible with quantum mechanics. Maybe one of them is right. The model that is not going to be able to know. So you need to. And then what? So think about this and think about that we are now here in some science, and we need to get to the current satellites in space and man on the moon and all that. So again, education is fundamental, and safeguarding education is fundamental. So how do we do that? What do we do effectively? What do we need to do? And the principle of Russell Group universities are ones I like, and I think are basically the right way forward. So they say that university will support students and staff to become AI literate. So you don't have to do it yourself. There's going to be a guide, sort of a thing that you learn, and good practice is shared, and we're on the same page on certain things. Staff is equipped to support students to use generative AI tools effectively and appropriately in their learning experience. So we learn about it and then transfer this to students. And teaching assessment is adapted to incorporate the ethical use. This doesn't say potentially we're going to let them use models. This says literally everything needs to incorporate this now. It's very strong. While, of course, academic rigor and integrity is upheld, because what universities do is give a piece of paper that says you possess these skills now, and that needs to remain. This is the primary function of universities in terms of staff-student relationships, right? So we don't want cheating to be possible or easy, because otherwise, whatever we're certifying, we lose track of, and then how do we know if we're doing our job? And there's something about collaboratively working so that there's sort of a consensus. But yeah, these are the Russell Group principles. And so what are the general qualities of a good policy? So it's precise. Precision is important. I'll talk about it a little more later. But it avoids statements which are vague and non-specific. It just say we may eventually consider good usage. No, it says this good usage is when it's incorporated. It's explicit, so it endorses and encourages responsible AI usage. It doesn't avoid the subject. It doesn't say maybe there are some cases. It just says this is here now. We need to deal with it. It's honest. It doesn't say the AI is bad at something when it's not. It doesn't say the AI is good at something when it's not. But AI cannot ever generate an original idea is not honest thing to say, because it can. AI is, or for instance, AI can emulate a human fully, and it has exactly the same insight as humanity. That's also wrong. So honesty is important. It's fair, so it ensures that the safeguards for the students are applied uniformly. An example of this, I mean, fair and inclusive sort of complement each other. GPT-4 is paid, is better than others. So if we want to do something advanced with AI, we should let students access GPT-4. I think the market will solve that. Or a student doesn't have a device, we should give it to them. Or fair means if we, I don't know, if we decide that AI cannot be used, but then it turns out that students who don't speak English very well can write better if they use AI, and that's not malpractice or anything, then we sort of recognize that and remove the scrutiny that was being a roadblock to their performance. So that's what I mean by fair and inclusive. Robust, so there still needs to be safeguards for academic integrity. We're not just going to close our eyes and pretend it's not here. Adaptable, again, AI changes very quickly, and it will keep changing very quickly. So a policy, again, there are some examples later, but remember, fluid, adaptable, it's general enough to deal with the future already without waiting for things to happen. And human-centric, again, as we've said, it needs to preserve human skills. So humans should still learn what the new intended learning objectives are. This is not about university policy, it's also about your course. So this kind of thing should apply to whatever thing you decide to tell to students about AI in your course. Of course, on a very smaller scale, but still, for instance, again, banning AI where now you realize that Grammarly is using it is unfair, okay? Because some students use Grammarly disproportionately, and your course implicitly recognizes that, because in the past 10 years, its average grades have been based on Grammarly being allowed, and you're being unfair here. Classic example. So a word on detection. So don't use detection, that's the word. So right now, false positive rates are significant. 1% is significant. Well, 1% if a student writes 70 essays during their career, it's a 50% probability of being accused wrongly of malpractice. So just mentioning that. Vulnerable to basic attacks, it's incredibly trivially easy to fool any detector currently on the market. A little paraphrasing, some classic attacks that used to work against Turnitin plagiarism work. There's a paper on this, which is out from an undergraduate student, I think the University of Maryland, but don't quote me on that. They're not falsifiable. A detector doesn't give you any tool despite its assessment. Turnitin plagiarism gives you the link to the plagiarized source. Detectors don't. So they just say, yeah, this looks like it's AI generated. Why? It just does. Maybe it's this, maybe it's not. And this is kind of the current status, but maybe they will improve. Maybe they will, well, this is fundamental. It should be after further, but these two maybe will improve. But as soon as you allow any AI usage, then since all detectors do is look at the final thing that you submitted and check whether it looks like something that models generate according to their weights and probabilities and all the things we've seen before, well, then maybe it's normal practice. Or maybe it is, who knows? The detector doesn't tell you. So if you say you can use AI to, improve your syntax, then detectors cannot be here anymore. So a full ban policy allegedly could imply detection. So you cannot use it ever. So as soon as a detector, which doesn't have false positive, assuming it's even possible, comes out, then I employ it. But as we've seen, principles kind of strongly say that you cannot ban it. So they become detrimental. Why do they become detrimental? Because students fear this a lot. There have been thousands of cases in which students were accused of malpractice, and even if they're acquitted months later, you know how formal the malpractice procedure is, and that's incredibly stressful. So you have students, well not here, because here you pay less money, but in England, you have students who've paid tens of thousands of pounds, and they're like, either I use GPT and I'm slightly more efficient in my assignment and it would be beneficial, or I just don't. Let's take the safe route, because it's too dangerous now. And I saw in The Guardian that student was accused, and they had to spend I don't know, $20,000 to get a linguistics professor to say, no, this is actually wrong. All this because plagiarism companies and other companies are sort of trying to sell you the detector, because before you know this is not working well or it's useless. Because, well, honestly, who is going to plagiarize in 5 years? People want to just generate an essay. So why would you plagiarize another? So there is this strong business incentive. So avoid detection and speak up when someone tries to put it somewhere. It's just dangerous and unfair and against good ethos and against the very principles that we are allegedly following. So I have a paper coming out of this. So at some point it will get published. It's called Contra AI Detection. So yeah, you know what position I take. And so I look at lots of things that have been done and sort of argue following these guidelines and more on why there's just no reason to even think about using it. Okay. So 2 examples of policies, again, just to say. So 3 examples. So the first is the University of Stanford, which says, this was a very early policy. So it says, absent a clear statement, use or consultation with generative AI shall be treated similar to assistance from another person, a very common stance in the early period. And then it says, using generative AI tools to substantially complete an assignment is not permitted. And then it goes on to talk about policies. Now, this is not a great policy because it's vague. When students read this, they read substantially and they wonder what it means. And most of them are probably going to be risk averse and just not use it. So what you've accomplished through what seems like a reasonable policy is that most people are not going to use it. This is validated by sort of many focus groups have been in recently, in which we ask students who are not using it, why not? And the answer is like malpractice. I'm scared of being accused of malpractice. Still not published, but they will be published because these have been run in the summer mainly. And so this is not bad, but it's vague. Second example, I still can't believe this exists. So this is the University of Boston. It's called Gaia. And they do the following. They say, first of all, when you use AI, this is like the toy example of a bad policy. It's got all the things I think are bad, so that's why it's here. So when you use AI, add an appendix showing the entire exchange. Now, they think of AI as like a calculator. I did 3 times 4 and 12 came out. But if you've used it, you know that you can talk to it. And I mean, to write a recent paper I wrote, my conversation was 473 messages long, because I kept going on and on about idea generation, brainstorming. How can I say this better? How can I say that better? Are you misunderstanding this? Or give me 10 synonyms of that. You know, you can use it for everything. You can just talk to it, I mean, verbally. So this thing is unworkable. And here it says that students should employ detection tools prior to submission, ensuring that their submitted work is not mistakenly flagged. So in their opinion, a student takes their entirely handwritten original thing, chucks it into some meat grinder detector with a privacy policy that doesn't exist, and then says, oh, this is mistakenly flagged, I have to change it now. Boom. By the way, worst thing that can happen here is that an essay mill puts out a fake detector, gets essays from students, resells them, sort of gets ahead of the student, and they get accused of plagiarism. This is completely conceivable. And if I were an essay mill guy, I would do it. But hopefully they're not as smart. But yeah, so this kind of policy sort of encourages everything that's bad about it. If you see this and you're a slightly smart student, you're just going to say, I'm going to steer clear of any AI. And then again, what you've accomplished is that students are going to be disadvantaged in the future. So what do you do? Well, it's actually one of the best I've seen. There will be a critique, because of course I have to critique something. I'm not like, you paid for my train, so yeah, I have to be nice. So you do great things. So first of all, you say that you don't seek prohibit, but you want to support students in learning effectively, ethically, critically, and transparently. Very good words, but then you follow up on this. So one example, there's a long page, I cannot put it all here, but this is an explicit list of appropriate use of generative AI. A student reading this knows that doing any of these things is appropriate. That's great. A student that wants to improve grammar and writing structure knows that's allowed. It's compliant with the university policy. It's on the website. If an instructor accuses them, they can be like, hey, have you read the university website? What are you on about? And then experiment with, this is very broad too. It's like writing structure. You can ask it to rewrite paragraphs that you don't like. Generate ideas, drafting ideas, planning, answer questions about something, and then verify its factual accuracy. Getting it to summarize stuff, debugging code. You write code, it doesn't work. You ask AI why. That's allowed. That's great. I love it. Getting over writer's block, which basically means you can ask it to start writing for you and then take inspiration from it. So of course, this places a great deal of trust on the student, because once you allow any of this, you cannot detect anything anymore, assuming you could in the first place. Still, that's good, and that's a good policy. So what's one critique, just to say? Again, I think this is top 3 I've seen, probably. But this is about staff, and it says, okay, in-person examination are not the ideal solution, because we all know that they're not conducive to meaningful inclusive assessment. I completely agree. Also, that's research validated. But then there are a few examples in which it says, oh, you could use AI to do, you could basically make students do stuff that AI cannot do, which is a red flag, because we don't know what AI can do. And we certainly don't know what AI can do tomorrow. So require students to critique or fix problems, that GPT-4 can do that. Unique data sets, you can just chuck them into GPT-4, advanced data analysis, and it gives you all the statistics that you might ever want. Engage in critical analysis, even GPT-3, which is the free version, can do that. So this kind of box points in a direction when it's saying, be smart with your assessment and make your assessments in a way that AI cannot fully do them. That's a bit of a gamble, okay? Especially in the fact that you need to rewrite it next year, very likely, and then again, and then again. So is this an effective thing? Well, no. I say this, I've been saying this for a year and I keep saying it. Assume that the AI can actually do the thing. So assume that the AI is fully parallel to a human student and can reproduce an output, and you absolutely cannot tell. What then? Like, your calculator can multiply integers. There's no way around it. What then? It's easier, because if we assume this and we develop a policy which is decent against this assumption, then it's future-proof. And I'm not saying it's easy to develop, but it's not easy to develop one that's carefully looks at current limitations and balances them with checks. So The alternative is the continuous redesign. Any of you who follow the advice, include graphics in your exam, in your take-home exam, so that students cannot just write graphics into GPT, like include the drawing of a box to assess physics and splitting forces across axes. Cool, GPT can do that now. So next year you need to redo it. If you had redeveloped the assessment in a different way, going in a different direction, adding a human element is kind of the key, then you wouldn't need to. So again, as a short-term measure, if you have 3 hours to change your assessment, absolutely go for the thing that you think, hey, I cannot do right now. But if we're talking about a long-term change, which is future-proof, then we sort of need to stop thinking about wider AI limitations. We may as well be at the point where AI can genuinely replicate a student's work, especially at lower levels, especially year 1 or year 2. Not saying PhD, but undergraduate or lower. We're probably there. So be explicit. So explicitly teach students about language models by asking them questions, by making them reflect, by giving them exercises, support them in using them, teach them why it's important to them. Like this thing about human knowledge and mistakes, they need to understand it like at a deep level, so they're motivated to learn. And then of course, authentic assessment motivates them to learn because they know that the grade they'll get will depend on their skills, possibly their skills to use AI too, but their skills. So they're going to come out with the room knowing what they know. This is not optional. You may think, I have a closed book exam. I don't care. I'm just going to keep doing what I've always been done. Maybe I'll put a disclaimer about AI, but 90% of my exam is assessed in the room. Yeah, okay, but still, they could help them revise. And students who revise better probably get better marks. So students who follow your advice are disadvantaged. So you're a bad teacher. So you should encourage them to use them, actively have them use them, perhaps even by giving summative points for AI usage that they can evidence. And workplace, they need to use AI in the workplace. That's also true. So what's a desirable endgame? I'm kind of time. So students are explicitly educated on all of this. The learning objectives reflect all this. So they are taking into account the existence of models, either by changing or by being assessed in a controlled environment. Yeah, this is point 3. And then robust authentic assessment is developed and is the main motivator for students other than wanting to learn, in that they cannot just take the easy road and cheat because their assessment is not going to have that. And again, I know that human contact here is kind of crucial. Human contact doesn't necessarily mean you're in a room, you have 2 hours. You could think about milestones. You could think about perhaps handwriting, even though that's not really robust. In project supervision, again, give more time for meetings with the supervisor, draft submission, milestones, all sorts of things in which you can enhance the human elements. But by robust authentic assessment, I mean the student genuinely cannot make AI do it, okay? So that is something that is not optional, in my opinion. We cannot just pretend that we have vague safeguards because they don't work. And of course, while we develop all that, talk to students about malpractice. Most of them actually don't want to commit malpractice, surprise. They actually want to learn because they paid money to learn. So just tell them, if you do this, it's malpractice because you're using notions that you haven't verified, and then they're going to take time to actually verify them. Most of them are actually interested in learning. In-person assessment are a safe haven again. Consider tracking drafts, big red asterisk here. We all know that surveillance environments are oppressive. So by tracking drafts, I don't mean you can only work on Cadmus in this environment, and if you copy and paste, I'm going to make you do an oral vibe of 30 minutes. I mean, send me a draft of the project every 10 days, and then we discuss where you are, and you tell me what you've written, and we talk about it. And then that probably encourages most of them to not just generate AI, because then what are they going to say in front of you? Regardless of whether that's part of the mark. There's still like kind of human element there. Don't use detectors, don't ban AI, maximize human interaction, I've already said this. And yeah, some people are going to cheat. Some people are genuinely going to generate with GPT, submit, and good luck you finding out. So familiarize yourself with counter-cheating procedures. Essay mills are not new. They're just very easy to use right now. So you should use them, but the case where a professor puts an assignment in a detector, and the detector says AI generator, and the professor says, I'm giving you a 0, enter, and sends the email. Yeah, no. Probably I don't need to tell you that, but it happened in some colleges. So when you suspect malpractice, read the guidelines, start the procedure, and let the independent panel come to a conclusion. Probably people on the panel know more about AI than you do, because they've been looking at this for ages, and they're very scared of the future. And then last minute, I said, I'll tell you how to use GPT and friends, so how to use language models. Literally talk to them is my advice. They are trained to be conversational models. They're trained to be conversation partners, okay? So if you do prompt engineering, if you are Albert Einstein and you're solving physics undergraduate, or you put some strange text to make them break out of their reinforcement learning, all very fun if you're an AI researcher. If you're a guy just trying to get your emails written more like faster, yeah, just trying to get your emails written faster, then talk to it. Just say, hi, I need to do this. I need to do it this way. Can you help me? And the model will do that. So how to use AI, start using it, talk to it. If you don't like typing, talk to it, like install the app and talk to it. Explain what you want. It's not going to read your mind. How you want it. Be critical, so all your ideas should be all the ideas in the thing should be your ideas. GPT is just scrambling them, moving them, phrasing them, expressing them, but don't let it take control of the creative part, or you're just doing random words, because again, there is no insight in the model. And as AI gets better, there are a few things it cannot quite do right now with this approach, but it will probably be able to do in the future. If you have a very complex prompt that you copy and paste, it might break tomorrow and you're back at square one. So there's a future-proofing element here. For instance, remember last week OpenAI fired Sam Altman? A lot of companies were like, okay, my model is about to get destroyed if GPT goes offline. And they sort of approached Google and said, can I move everything to you? So yeah, if your model is based on tweaks and things, if your model of using AI is based on a specific function of a specific model in a specific thing, these are startups, okay? They come and go, and everything changes fast. If you sort of learn foundational use, when you talk to it, and like if you had a helpful assistant, that's probably future-proof. Now, there's not a future where we don't have language models. Clearly, they are here to stay. One final word, privacy. It's likely that this will be less of a concern when the big names like Microsoft and Google put AI in their products that we already use with an already GDPR-compliant privacy policy. But right now, random tool on the internet promises to do this thing that GPT cannot do. Yeah, you haven't read the privacy policy, okay? So careful if you want to use it to do some stats on your student marks and you upload the file to GPT. Yeah, don't. If it's in Microsoft, and then it's part of the 365 license of the university, that's a different thing. But random AI on random website is gonna take all your data and steal it. Okay, that's a fact. That's the default assumption. Okay, so thank you for the attention. I have a Twitter, which I refuse to call X. This is a blog where I used to put stuff about AI. You'll find there's not much things written because I was writing papers, but I will keep doing. I have some things planned that I will publish in the near future. And this is my email. It's very obvious. If you want to try something with AI in your course and you want someone else's opinion on it, or someone that can help you analyze data or whatever, feel free to drop me an email. I am decent at response times. One thing I'm doing, for instance, in Liverpool, there's a course of project writing in maths, and students have been told they can use AI freely. And then an external guy, will interview them on how they did it. It's an observational thing, and I will never share the information with the lecturer on who's who. So just to see, given the opportunity to do whatever they want, what do they do? It's kind of this type of study. But yeah, any role, any feedback, I'm happy to help. And I'm also happy to see what people are doing, which is because a really hard thing to keep track of what everyone is doing, which might be genuinely helpful. I mean, it might be something I want to do and I want to bring to Manchester. And maybe there's an excellent framework being developed here by some of you, and I have no idea. So given how fast this is moving, it's probably best if I know now than if I know when in 1 year and a half you publish it on some journal, which took 6 months to review it. So yeah, that's me. I'm on time, hopefully. But yeah.
think because we're at 3 o'clock, what I'll suggest is we go outside
Yeah.
for questions and see if there's another class in. But thank you again for Cesare for a great